I have to accept this view of reality that's totally meaningless, but I can't actually live without meaning. So in our version, I have to make up meaning. Like in the earlier world, meaning was constantly breathed into you by God. Everything was full of meaning. And you were full of meaning, not because you had to make it up, because God is speaking your meaning into the world right now. But if you say meaning is not out there at all, but only in here, and if you also have a totally privatized, individualized version of meaning, then if you want to have any, this is, existentialism essentially. If you can have any meaning, you have to make it all up for yourself. So your generation, has been given this intolerable burden of creating their own meaning every day. And then you think, oh, that one was crap. I was in my goth phase. Now I'll be in this, or I'll be this. Do you know what I mean? And you're constantly under hyper anxiety. A, you have to make up the meaning. And B, you have to simultaneously believe that the meaning is meaningless in the end, because there's no meaning out there. That's what being disenchanted means. C.S. Lewis described it in the 1920s. He says, looking back, he wrote it in the 1950s, looking back his life in the 20s when he was a secular philosophy don, he said, the two hemispheres of my mind were in the sharpest contrast. On the one hand, a many-islanded sea of poetry and myth. On the other, a glib and shallow rationalism. Nearly everything I loved I believed to be imaginary. Nearly everything I believed to be true I thought grim and meaningless. I've been a chaplain for, decades in a great university, and I've therefore had something of the nurture and care of the best and brightest of the minds of, your generation and the one before. I see the mental toll of this living in with this, as it turns out, I believe, completely false distinction between subjective and objective. Yeah. And, so we have to get out of that, because we're not, if we're even partly right to say that the cosmos is like a poem, we're in it, and the poet is speaking us into being and helping us within ourselves to read. If that's how we actually are, but we're constantly blocking those signals because our culture has told us that they're unreal. And instead we're having to justify ourselves in kind of endless cycle of consumerism, because the only point at which you're validated is when, you make the purchase. And then you're suddenly, that's no good anymore, as Neil Young put it in a beautiful song, now you're home alone with a piece of crap, so you go out and buy the next thing. That you can't go on like that. It's not only bad for us, it's bad for the planet. So this great recovery, for me, it's amazing. It turns out this book I loved because it consoled me as I was living through that. Turns out not to be a projection on the wall of my prison to make the prison a little more tolerable. It turns out actually to be the key to get out of the prison.